The casserole dish shattered across the kitchen floor. Shrimp and grits, her dead mother's recipe, splattered across Italian marble. Behind her, her husband's voice was calm, too calm. We need to talk about the divorce. She was 7 months pregnant. Her mother had been buried 3 weeks ago, and the man she loved had just handed her divorce papers in their own kitchen. But here's what makes this story different from every betrayal you've ever heard. The other woman? It was her best friend, the woman who held her hand at the funeral, the woman who cried on her shoulder and whispered, "I'm here for you, Vivi, always." That same woman had been sleeping with her husband for 14 months, and they'd been planning this together, waiting for her mother to die so they could make their move. He called her a nobody, said she wouldn't fight, offered her a studio apartment and $12,000 a month from a man worth $800 million. What he didn't know, what nobody knew, was that her mother, the humble piano teacher who clipped coupons and drove a 15-year-old car, had been secretly sitting on $4.2 billion, and she left every single penny to her pregnant daughter. This is the story of a woman who lost everything in one night: her husband, her best friend, her dignity, and discovered she'd been a billionaire all along. But the real inheritance wasn't the money. It was something no one could ever take away. Stay with me. This one will stay with you long after it ends. Lesson and meaning. This story carries a truth that every woman needs to hear. Your worth was never determined by the person who left you. It was never measured by the ring on your finger or the name on your mailbox. Sometimes the people closest to you will betray you. Sometimes the person you trusted most will be the one holding the knife. But betrayal doesn't define you. How you rise from it does. Eleanor Calloway raised her daughter with nothing, on purpose, because she knew that a woman who learns her own strength in the dark will never be afraid of the light. This story is for every woman who has ever been called a nobody, who has ever been underestimated, who has ever sat on a kitchen floor picking up broken pieces and wondering if she would ever feel whole again. You were never small. You just didn't know how tall you stood. If this story touched something in you, if you felt that fire, that anger, that hope, then you're exactly who this channel was made for. We tell stories about women who refuse to stay broken, women who rise, women who remember who they are. If you haven't already, tap that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Leave a comment and tell me. Have you ever discovered your own strength in your darkest moment? I read every single comment, and your stories inspire the next ones we tell. Hit that like button. Share this with a friend who needs to hear it today. And if you want more stories like this, check out the video on your screen right now. I picked it just for you. Now let's begin. The casserole dish slipped from Vivian's hands and shattered across the kitchen floor. Behind her, Grant's voice was calm, too calm. We need to talk about the divorce. The word hung in the air like smoke. Divorce. She stood there in the kitchen of their Manhattan penthouse, barefoot, 7 months pregnant, wearing her dead mother's cardigan. The shrimp and grits, Eleanor's recipe, the last one her mama ever taught her, lay splattered across Italian marble. Steam still rising from the mess. 3 weeks, that was all. 3 weeks since they lowered her mother into the ground. 3 weeks since Vivian had stood in a cemetery in Virginia, clutching a single white rose, while Grant checked his phone behind her back. She had told herself he was just bad at grief. Some men were. Some men didn't know how to hold space for sadness. She turned around slowly. Grant stood in the doorway, wearing a charcoal suit. His tie was loosened, his jaw was set the way it always was when he'd made a decision without consulting her. On the counter between them, he placed a manila envelope, thick, Official, the kind of envelope that changes the shape of a life. It's better for both of us, he said. Vivian looked at the envelope, then at the casserole on the floor, then at her husband of 23 months, the man who proposed to her on a Tuesday, between meetings, in his office. She had thought it was spontaneous, romantic even, a man so busy building an empire that he couldn't wait for the weekend to ask her to be his wife. Now she saw it differently. A man who scheduled love like a conference call. Why? She asked. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. She hated that, hated how her throat tightened around the word, turning it into something fragile, something breakable. Like the dish on the floor, Grant ran his hand through his hair, rehearsed. She could tell because he did it the same way he did before investor presentations. The casual gesture that was anything but casual. We've grown apart, Vivian. You know that. I need someone who fits my world, someone who understands the life I'm building. I'm your wife. I'm carrying your child. And I'll take care of both of you. I've already found you a place, a studio on the Upper West Side. It's nice. You'll like it. A studio. He'd already found her a studio, which meant this wasn't a conversation. It was an eviction notice dressed up as a discussion. She noticed things then. Small things that her brain had been filing away for months without telling her. His collar, there was perfume on his collar, and it wasn't hers. She wore vanilla. This was something sharper, something floral and expensive. His phone buzzed on the counter. He flipped it face down without looking. Fast. Too fast. Is there someone else? She asked. Grant's jaw tightened. His eyes shifted left. Just for a second, just enough. This isn't about that, he said. But his eyes had already answered. She knew how he looked when he lied. She'd been studying that face for 2 years, the way his gaze drifted left when the truth was something he'd rather redesign, the way his nostrils flared so slightly you'd miss it unless you were the woman who slept beside him every night. She got down on her knees, not to beg, not to plead. She got down on her knees and started picking up the broken pieces of the casserole dish. Porcelain, marriage, same thing, shattered on expensive floors. She gathered the shards carefully, cupping them in her palms, pressing them together as if they might somehow reassemble themselves into something whole. The baby kicked, hard, right beneath her ribs, as if to say, I'm still here, even if he isn't. Grant watched her for a moment, then he straightened his tie. I'll give you the weekend, he said, to process, to pack. He walked out. His shoes clicked against the marble. The front door opened, closed, the lock turned, and Vivian was alone in a penthouse that had never felt like home. She sat on the kitchen floor for a long time, her pregnant belly pressed against her thighs. A shard of porcelain sat in her palm, smooth on one side, jagged on the other. She could feel the grits drying on the marble beneath her, could smell the shrimp and butter and Old Bay seasoning mixing with the lavender candle she'd lit earlier. Her mother's scent. Lavender. Always lavender. Her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Delaney Archer, her best friend since freshman year at the University of Virginia. The woman who held her hair back after too many margaritas on her 21st birthday. The woman who cried at her wedding. The woman who sat with her in the hospital room when Eleanor's heart stopped. Hey, babe, Delaney's voice said through the speaker. Warm, familiar, concerned. How are you holding up? Want me to come over? Vivian almost said yes, almost opened her mouth and let the word tumble out, the way she'd done 1,000 times before. Yes, come over. Bring wine. Bring chocolate. Bring your shoulder and your laugh and your ability to make everything feel survivable. Almost, but something stopped her. Something in the timing. Something in the way Delaney's call came exactly 11 minutes after Grant walked out the door, as if she'd been waiting, as if she knew. Maybe, Vivian said. I'll think about it. She hung up, set the phone on the floor beside her, pressed her palm against her belly where the baby was turning somersaults. It's you and me now, little one, she whispered. She didn't know it yet, couldn't have known, but the phone call she almost answered would have been the cruelest part of all. Morning came whether she wanted it to or not. Vivian hadn't slept. She'd moved from the kitchen floor to the nursery sometime around midnight, drawn there by something she couldn't name. The room was pale yellow, soft. She'd painted it herself, 5 coats over a weekend, while Grant was in Chicago, closing a deal. The crib sat beneath the window, assembled with her own hands and a YouTube tutorial because Grant said he'd get someone to do it, and then never did. She sat in the rocking chair she'd bought at a flea market in Brooklyn. It creaked when she leaned back, a familiar sound, a safe sound. She rocked and replayed the conversation in her mind, every word, every pause, every rehearsed gesture. 23 months of marriage. He proposed on a Tuesday. Who proposes on a Tuesday? A man who checks a box, a man who slots a wife into his calendar between lunch with investors and a 4 o'clock tea time. She picked up her phone, scrolled to her mother's contact. Eleanor Calloway. She pressed call before she could stop herself. It rang once, twice, 3 times, 4. You've reached Eleanor. Leave something lovely. Her mother's voice, warm as bread, steady as rainfall. Vivian hung up, pressed call all again, just to hear her. One more time. You've reached Eleanor. Leave something lovely. She held the phone against her chest, closed her eyes. The baby kicked gently, as if trying to comfort her from the inside. By 9 o'clock, she'd made a decision. Not a big one. Not the kind of decision that changes everything. Just the kind of decision that a woman makes when the ground has opened beneath her and she needs to understand why. Grant's iPad sat on the kitchen counter. He'd left it behind. Careless. Or maybe he simply didn't think she'd look. That was the thing about Grant. He underestimated her, had always underestimated her. It was the foundation of their entire relationship. His certainty that she was too gentle, too grateful, too naive to question him. She knew his password. Their wedding date, October 14th. Ironic. She typed it in. The screen unlocked. She opened his messages. The name at the top of the list made her stomach drop. Delaney. Not Delaney Archer, just Delaney. With a red heart emoji next to the name. The kind of casual intimacy that takes months to build. Vivian scrolled to the beginning of the thread. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was not. The messages started 14 months ago. Not weeks, not a few months. 14 months before the wedding anniversary, before the pregnancy, before Eleanor got sick, before everything. There were pet names. Baby. Dee. My girl. There were plans. Dinners, hotel rooms, weekends when Grant told Vivian he had business in Dallas or meetings in Boston. There were photographs. Delaney in lingerie, posing in what Vivian recognized as Grant's corner office. The one with the view of Central Park. The one where he'd proposed to her on that Tuesday. She kept scrolling. The messages got worse. One from Delaney, dated the day of Eleanor's funeral. The day Vivian stood in a cemetery in Virginia with dirt on her mother's coffin and tears on her face and her best friend's arm around her shoulders. How much longer do we have to pretend, Delaney had written. I'm tired of being her shoulder to cry on. Grant's reply came 3 minutes later. Soon, let her grieve, then we move, then we move. Like Vivian was a piece of furniture to be relocated. Like her grief was an inconvenience to be endured until it became acceptable to throw her away. She wasn't crazy. She knew something had been wrong. She knew it. The late nights, the distracted dinners, the way he flinched when she reached for his phone, the way he stopped saying her name during intimate moments, the way Delaney always seemed to know Grant's schedule. She had known. Somewhere beneath the surface, in the place where instinct lives, she had known. She kept scrolling, past the plans, and the pet names, and the photographs, past the lies, and the logistics of betrayal. Then she found the messages about the baby. Grant's words, typed in the flat gray bubbles of a text message. She can have custody. I don't want the kid complicating things. Delaney's response? A laughing emoji. A laughing emoji. Her best friend. Her unborn child. A laughing emoji. Vivian's hands shook so badly the iPad slipped from her fingers. She caught it against her belly. The baby kicked. Hard. Right where the iPad pressed against her skin. As if the child already knew. As if the child was already fighting. She locked the iPad, unlocked it, locked it, unlocked it, as if the messages might rearrange themselves into something survivable, as if she might scroll through one more time and find a different version. A version where her husband loved her. A version where her best friend was actually her best friend. A version where the laughing emoji was about something else, anything else. But the words didn't change. They never do. She called Delaney, not to confront her. She wasn't ready for that. She called because she needed to hear the voice, needed to measure it against what she now knew, needed to understand how a person could sound so warm while being so cold. Hey, Viv, Delaney said. I was just thinking about you. You shouldn't be alone right now. Come stay with me. I'll make up the guest room. We'll watch those terrible movies you love and eat ice cream straight from the carton. Every word was a knife now, each one precisely placed. The concern in Delaney's voice, the warmth, the familiarity. It was all performance, Oscar-worthy performance from a woman who had been sleeping with Vivian's husband for over a year while holding her hand through her mother's death. Maybe, Vivian said. I'll think about it. The same words as last night, but this time they tasted different. This time they tasted like a door closing. She hung up, walked to the bathroom, gripped the sides of the sink and threw up. Not morning sickness. She was past that. This was something else entirely. This was the physical response to discovering that every person you trusted had been lying to your face. Truth sickness. That's what it was. Her body rejecting the poison it had been swallowing for 14 months. She rinsed her mouth, looked at herself in the mirror. 30 years old, 7 months pregnant, dark circles under her eyes. Her mother's cardigan hanging loose on her shoulders. She didn't look like a woman whose world had just ended. She looked tired. She looked like someone who had been tired for a very long time and was just now realizing it. The worst message wasn't about the affair. It wasn't about the hotel rooms or the lingerie photos or the pet names. The worst message was about her baby, her child, the life growing inside her that she already loved more than she had ever loved anything. A laughing emoji. That was what her baby was worth to them. She pressed her hands against her belly, felt the baby turn, felt the warmth and the weight and the impossible miracle of it. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry you're coming into this. Then she straightened up, splashed water on her face, dried her hands on the towel that still had Grant's initials monogrammed on it. She had work to do. The iPad held more secrets than she expected. Vivian had spent the night reading, not the romance novels she kept on her bedside table, not the baby books stacked beside the crib. She spent the night reading the digital trail of her husband's betrayal. And what she found in the early hours of the morning changed everything. A folder labeled Prenup Review, hidden in Grant's email app. Inside were messages between Grant and his attorney, a man named Douglas Keller, at a firm on Park Avenue. The thread went back to just after the wedding. Douglas had written, Grant, the prenuptial agreement was never properly filed with the court. We need to rectify this immediately. Without a valid filing, the agreement is unenforceable. Grant's reply, I'll handle it. A follow-up from Douglas 2 months later. Grant, this is urgent. The prenup remains unfiled. If this isn't addressed, Vivian would be entitled to equitable distribution under New York law. Grant's reply, she's a nobody. She won't fight. Drop it. She's a nobody. She won't fight. Vivian read those words 3 times. Each time they cut differently. The first time, they cut like surprise. The second time, like recognition. The third time, like gasoline hitting a spark she didn't know she had. Without a valid prenuptial agreement, she was entitled to half of Grant's estate. $800 million. His lawyers had warned him, twice, and he had dismissed them because she was a nobody, because she wouldn't fight. His arrogance was his blind spot. And blind spots, she was learning, are where everything hides. There was more. A separate email chain between Grant and his mother, Celeste Whitmore. Celeste, who had never once invited Vivian to call her by her first name. Celeste, who gave her a monogrammed bathrobe for Christmas, with Grant's initials, not hers. Celeste, who looked at Vivian the way someone looks at a stain on a tablecloth. Delaney comes from the right family, Celeste had written. This should have been the match from the beginning. End this quietly. Grant's response, I'm handling it. She'll take the studio and be grateful. Grateful, as if dignity were a luxury she couldn't afford, as if she should thank him for the privilege of being discarded. Vivian closed the iPad, set it on the counter, walked to the nursery, and sat in the rocking chair. The wedding album was on the shelf beside the crib. She pulled it down, heavy, leather-bound, the kind of album that costs more than some people's rent. She opened it. The first photograph, her and Delaney, in college, freshman year, sharing a dorm room the size of a closet. They'd pushed their beds together the first week because Delaney was afraid of thunderstorms. They'd promised each other, half drunk on cheap wine during sophomore year, that they'd be each other's maids of honor. No matter what, pinky swear, blood oath, the kind of promise that feels sacred when you're 20 and don't yet know what the world does to promises. She turned the page. Grant's proposal. The photograph was taken by his assistant, Vivian on one knee, no, Grant on one knee. In his office, between meetings, she was wearing jeans and a blouse she'd bought on sale. He was wearing a suit that cost more than her car. She had thought it was spontaneous. She had told everyone the story. He just couldn't wait. He pulled me into his office and got down on one knee. She'd laughed every time she told it. She wasn't laughing now. Now she saw it for what it was. A scheduled event, a box to check, a Tuesday proposal from a man who treated love like a transaction. Another page, her mother at the wedding, Eleanor, in a simple blue dress she'd sewn herself, standing beside the cake, smiling, but her eyes. Vivian could see it now, in the photograph, what she'd missed in person. Her mother's eyes held something careful, something worried. Eleanor's quiet warning came back to her now. They'd been standing in the church bathroom 5 minutes before the ceremony. Eleanor had straightened Vivian's veil and said, "He loves what you give him, Vivian. Make sure he loves who you are." She hadn't understood then. She understood now. The last photograph she looked at, Delaney's toast at the reception, standing in a green dress, champagne glass raised, mascara slightly smudged from crying. To my best friend, Delaney had said, who deserves the world. The room had laughed, applauded, but in the photograph, Delaney's eyes weren't on Vivian. They were on Grant, just for a second, just long enough to mean something, and Grant was looking back. Vivian closed the album, put it back on the shelf. She wouldn't need it again. She needed to breathe. That was all. Just breathe. She walked to the bathroom, turned on the faucet, filled the bathtub with warm water. Then she got in, fully clothed, her mother's cardigan, her maternity dress, everything. She sank down until the water reached her chin, felt it soak through the fabric, heavy and warm against her skin. She floated her hands over her belly. The baby turned, slow, peaceful, unaware of everything happening above the waterline. "It's you and me now, little one," she whispered. "It's you and me." She stayed there for 20 minutes, no crying, no screaming, just breathing, just the sound of water and the quiet rhythm of a baby turning in the warmth. When she finally got out, she was dripping on the marble floor, making a mess of Grant's pristine bathroom. She didn't care. She wrapped herself in a towel and walked to the foyer, leaving wet footprints all the way. The doorbell rang. A courier stood in the hallway. Young, barely 20, holding a thick legal envelope from a law firm she didn't recognize. Hargrove, Price and Associates. She signed for it, closed the door, stood there dripping, the envelope in her hands. Inside was a letter addressed to Vivian Calloway, sole surviving heir of Eleanor Hargrove Calloway. Hargrove, her mother's maiden name. The name Eleanor never talked about. The name that wasn't in any of the stories. Not the story about how Eleanor met Vivian's father at a jazz club in Richmond. Not the story about why she became a piano teacher. Not the story about the two-bedroom apartment in Virginia where she raised Vivian on a piano teacher's salary and a garden full of tomatoes. The letter requested her presence for the reading of her mother's complete estate. It used words Vivian didn't understand. Substantial holdings, controlling interest, trust provisions, fiduciary responsibility. She almost threw it away. Another legal document, another man in a suit trying to take something from her or give her something she didn't ask for, but the name stopped her. Hargrove. There was something about it, something heavy, something that felt like a locked door she'd walked past her entire life, without knowing there was a room on the other side. She set the envelope on the kitchen counter, right next to the divorce papers. 2 envelopes, one from the man who wanted to erase her, one from the mother who, it seemed, had hidden an entire world from her. She didn't open it, not yet. She had to choose between her pride and her security, her dignity and her baby's future. Both felt impossible to sacrifice. Both felt impossible to keep. She stood in the kitchen, wet cardigan dripping on the floor, and stared at the 2 envelopes. The prenuptial agreement that was supposed to leave her with nothing had never been filed, and the envelope from her dead mother's lawyers might change everything. But not tonight. Tonight she was just a woman standing in a puddle of her own making, 7 months pregnant, trying to remember how to breathe. She called the law firm the next morning. Her fingers shook as she dialed the number printed on the letterhead. She expected a receptionist, a cold, automated voice, the usual machinery of legal bureaucracy. Instead, a man answered on the second ring. His voice was warm, unhurried, the kind of voice that belonged to someone who had all the time in the world and wanted you to know it. "Malcolm Price," he said. "This is Vivian Calloway. I received a letter about my mother's estate." A pause, not uncomfortable, more like a man choosing his words carefully, like a doctor before he delivers news that will rearrange a life. "Vivian, I've been hoping you'd call. Your mother spoke about you often. She was very proud of you." "You knew my mother?" "For over 30 years. She was a remarkable woman. May I ask, did Eleanor ever mention the Hargrove family to you?" Vivian Ann sat down on the edge of her bed, The mattress creaked beneath her weight. Through the window, Manhattan sparkled in the morning light. Indifferent, beautiful, cruel. No, she said. My mother was a piano teacher. She lived in a two-bedroom apartment in Virginia. She drove a 15-year-old sedan. She clipped coupons from the Sunday paper. She made soup from vegetable scraps. She never mentioned any Hargrove family. Malcolm Price was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke, and the words he said dismantled everything Vivian thought she knew about her own life. Your mother was the eldest daughter of Franklin Hargrove, founder of Hargrove Industrial, one of the largest privately held companies in the southeastern United States. She walked away from the family at 22, changed her name, married your father, chose a different kind of life, but she never walked away from her inheritance. Vivian sat down, hard. The room tilted, the baby kicked, and for a moment she couldn't tell if the dizziness was from the news or from the child pressing against her diaphragm. I don't understand, she said. Your mother maintained her stake in Hargrove Industrial through a carefully structured trust. She added to it, over the years, through strategic investments managed by her brother, Theodore Hargrove. She also established a foundation for music education in rural communities. All of this was done quietly, deliberately. Your mother was perhaps the most private, wealthy person I've ever had the privilege of representing. How much? Vivian asked. The question felt absurd, like asking how deep the ocean is while standing on a beach with your toes in the foam. The total estate is valued at approximately $4.2 billion. The number didn't register. It sat in her ear like a foreign word. 4.2 billion. 4.2 billion dollars. Her mother. The woman who patched her jeans with fabric from old curtains. The woman who worked 10-hour days teaching piano to children who couldn't afford Steinways. The woman who cried when Vivian got a full scholarship to UVA because now you won't have to worry, baby. $4.2 billion. Vivian Pez's first reaction was not joy, not relief, not even surprise, really. It was anger. She never told me, she said. Her voice was tight, controlled, the way a dam holds water, steady until it isn't. My whole life, I worked 2 jobs through college. I wore secondhand clothes. I ate ramen for dinner 4 nights a week. She watched me struggle, and she never said a word. She wanted you to know who you were without the money, Malcolm said gently. She'd seen what it did to her family. Her father used wealth as a weapon. Her brother Theodore became what money made him. Eleanor wanted something different for you. She wanted you to have a foundation that couldn't be bought or taken away. She planned to tell me. She did. She was working on a timeline after the baby was born. She wrote you a letter. It's in the estate documents. Would you like me to read it to you, or would you prefer to read it yourself? Send it to me, Vivian said. Please. The letter arrived by email 20 minutes later. Vivian sat in the nursery to read it. The pale yellow walls, the crib she'd assembled herself, the rocking chair that creaked when she leaned back. She opened the email, tapped the attachment. Her mother's handwriting appeared on the screen. A scanned document, written in the careful cursive that Eleanor used for important things: birthday cards, permission slips, grocery lists for Thanksgiving dinner. My dearest Vivian, the letter began, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And I'm sorry I never told you face to face. I left the Hargrove name because money made people cruel. Your grandfather, your uncle, they measured love in leverage. I wanted you to grow up knowing that your worth was never a number. But this money is yours now. Use it to be free. Use it to be kind. And if anyone ever makes you feel small, remember, you were never small. You just didn't know how tall you stood. All my love, Mama. Vivian read it once, then again, then a third time, slower, letting each word settle into the place it was meant to go. She cried, for the first time since the funeral. Not the polite crying she'd done at the cemetery, dabbing her eyes with a tissue while Grant checked his phone. Not the numb, dry-eyed staring she'd done since then. She cried completely, openly, the kind of crying that comes from the bottom of your lungs and shakes your whole body and sounds like an animal in pain. She cried for her mother, for the woman who loved her enough to let her struggle, who loved her enough to leave her everything, who chose poverty over poison and gave her daughter the one thing money can't buy, the knowledge of who she was without it. She folded the letter along its original creases, pressed it against her chest, rocked forward and back, the way her mother used to rock her during thunderstorms, the way she would rock her own daughter soon, forward and back, until the crying stopped and the silence was warm instead of empty. My mother didn't keep this from me to hurt me. She kept it because she loved who I was becoming. The baby kicked. Vivian laughed through the tears, a wet, ragged sound, half sob, half joy. She pressed her hands against her belly. Your grandmother, she whispered, was the most extraordinary woman who ever lived, and she left us everything, everything. She sat there for a long time, rocking, breathing, feeling the impossible weight of $4.2 billion settle onto her shoulders like a coat she didn't know she owned. Then she picked up her phone and called Malcolm Price back. Malcolm, she said, I need you to keep this completely confidential. No announcements, no press, no contact with my husband or his attorneys. Of course, may I ask why? Because I want to see who people really are when they think I have nothing. There was a pause. Then Malcolm laughed, a quiet, respectful laugh. The laugh of a man who had just recognized Eleanor Hargrove's daughter. Your mother, he said, would be very proud. Grant called on Thursday morning. Businesslike, efficient, the way he talked to contractors and cleaning services and anyone else he considered beneath his attention. I need you out by Friday, he said. I'm having a guest move in this weekend. A guest. Not even the courage to say her name, not even the dignity of honesty. A guest. I've arranged $12,000 a month and temporary support, he continued. That's generous, considering the circumstances. My attorney will send the paperwork. $12,000 a month. From a man worth $800 million. The math was almost funny. It was like a king tossing a copper coin to a beggar and expecting gratitude. Fine, Vivian said. I'll be out by Friday. Good. I'm glad we can be adults about this. Adults. As if adultery and abandonment were signs of maturity. As if discarding your pregnant wife 3 weeks after her mother's funeral was simply good decision-making. She hung up, stood in the kitchen, looked at the penthouse she'd lived in for nearly 2 years, the furniture she hadn't chosen, the art she didn't understand, the view of Central Park that had never once felt like it belonged to her. Let him think I'm broken, she thought. Let him think I'm grateful for scraps. He doesn't know I could buy his entire company and turn it into a parking lot. But she wouldn't. That wasn't who her mother raised. Eleanor Calloway didn't teach her daughter to destroy. She taught her to build, to plant, to play Chopin until the music filled the empty spaces where pain used to live. Friday came. Vivian arrived at the penthouse at 10 in the morning with one suitcase and no expectations. What she found was worse than anything she'd imagined. Delaney was there, in the penthouse, wearing Vivian's robe, the white silk one with the lace trim that Eleanor had given her for Christmas 2 years ago. drinking coffee from Vivian's mug, the blue ceramic one with the chipped handle that said World's Okayest Mom. A gift from her coworker at the nonprofit, where she'd volunteered before the pregnancy. The audacity was breathtaking. Not just the affair, not just the lies, but the casual possession. The way Delaney stood in Vivian's kitchen, in Vivian's clothes, drinking from Vivian's cup, as if she'd already moved in, as if Vivian was the guest. "Vivi," Delaney said. She set down the mug and moved toward her with arms open, the hug pose, the comfort stance, the best friend choreography they'd performed 1,000 times. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. I know this must be so hard for you." The words were perfect. The tone was impeccable. If Vivian hadn't read the messages, she might have believed them. She might have fallen into that hug and cried on that shoulder and never known that the shoulder belonged to the woman who was sleeping with her husband and laughing about her baby. "When did it start?" Vivian asked. Her voice was flat, steady, a pond in winter. Delaney's face flickered, just for a second, a crack in the porcelain. "What do you mean? When did what?" 14 months. I read the messages. The color drained from Delaney's face. Then it came back. Different. Harder. The transformation was instant, like watching someone remove a mask they'd forgotten they were wearing. "Fine," Delaney said. Her voice changed too. The warmth evaporated. What was underneath was sharp and dry and cold. "You want the truth? He was never really yours. We connected on a level you couldn't reach. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but honestly, you should have seen this coming." "I deserved better than this," Vivian said. Not a question, not a plea, a statement of fact, delivered the way you state that water is wet or the sky is blue. I deserved better than both of you. Grant walked in then. He'd been in the bedroom, heard the confrontation, entered the kitchen with the confidence of a man who owns the building and everyone in it. "Let's not make this ugly, Vivian," he said. Vivian, her full name, not Vivi, not Honey, not even Hey. Vivian. Clinical. Distancing. The name you use for someone you're removing from your life. He stood next to Delaney, shoulder to shoulder, a united front. The husband and the best friend standing together in Vivian's kitchen, wearing Vivian's robe, asking Vivian not to make things ugly. She looked at them for a long moment, studied them, the way they stood, the way Grant's hand found the small of Delaney's back, the way Delaney leaned into him, possessive and performative. They looked like a couple, a real couple, and that was the thing that hurt the most. Not that it was happening, but that it had been happening for so long that they'd already become comfortable. Vivian packed one suitcase. She left behind the jewelry, the designer clothes, the shoes that cost more than her mother's monthly rent. She left behind everything Grant had given her because none of it was really hers. None of it had ever been hers. She took 4 things: her mother's cardigan, the baby's first ultrasound photo, Eleanor's cast iron skillet, and the estate letter from Hargrove, Price, and Associates. The doorman, Roberto, stood by the elevator with his hands clasped. He'd known Vivian for 2 years, had carried her groceries, had told her jokes in broken English, while she waited for cabs. He looked stricken. "Mrs. Whitmore," he whispered. "You deserve much better." She squeezed his hand. "I know, Roberto. I finally know." The elevator doors closed. The numbers descended. 27, 26, 25. Each floor a layer of a life she was leaving behind. By the time she reached the lobby, she was no longer Grant Whitmore's wife. She was Vivian Calloway, Eleanor's daughter, and she was done being small. She sat in her car in the parking garage for a long time. Didn't start it, just sat, hands on the wheel, The leather was cool against her palms. The baby kicked against the seatbelt. Through the windshield, she watched people walk past, couples holding hands, a woman pushing a stroller, an old man walking a small dog, everyone carrying something invisible, everyone moving forward. She did what she always did when the world fell apart. She packed one suitcase, left behind everything that could be replaced, took only what couldn't be bought. She started the car, pulled out of the garage, merged into traffic, and drove south, to Virginia, to her mother's empty apartment, to the only place that still felt like home. The apartment smelled like lavender and lemon furniture polish. Vivian stood in the doorway and breathed it in. The scent was so strong, so immediate, that for one impossible second, she thought her mother was still alive, that Eleanor was in the kitchen, humming Chopin, wiping down the counter with the yellow cloth she'd used since Vivian was a child. But the apartment was empty. The stillness confirmed it. She stepped inside, closed the door behind her, set her suitcase by the coat rack. Eleanor's coat still hung there, navy blue, wool, a button missing from the left cuff. The piano sat under the window. A Baldwin upright. Not expensive, not flashy, but it had the most beautiful tone Vivian had ever heard. Eleanor used to say that pianos were like people. The pretty ones weren't always the best. The best ones were the ones that had been played enough to find their voice. Sheet music still sat open on the stand. Chopin, Nocturne in E-flat major, Opus 9, number 2, her mother's favorite piece. She'd played it every evening after dinner. The notes would drift through the apartment like a lullaby, and Vivian would fall asleep to the sound of it, believing that all music came from her mother's hands. Eleanor's reading glasses sat on the kitchen counter, next to a half-finished crossword puzzle, Tuesday's paper. She died on a Wednesday. Vivian walked through every room, touched every surface. The bookshelf with the cracked spine of Pride and Prejudice. The windowsill where Eleanor kept herbs in small pots, basil, rosemary, thyme, all dead now, brown and brittle. Nobody had watered them. She opened drawers, not looking for anything specific, just looking. The way you look through a person's belongings after they're gone, searching for the shape of who they were when you weren't watching. In the bedroom closet, she found a locked cedar box. Old, the wood was dark and smooth, polished by decades of hands. She tried the latch. It was jammed. She found a hairpin in Eleanor's vanity and worked the lock open. Inside were photographs, not the kind you frame, the kind you hide. A young woman in a white dress, standing on the steps of a mansion. The woman was beautiful. Dark hair, strong jaw, eyes that looked like they could see through walls. It took Vivian a moment to realize it was her mother, Eleanor Hargrove, at maybe 20 years old, standing in front of a house that could have been a museum. Columns, fountains, a circular driveway with a car that cost more than most houses. Behind her, a man in a suit, stern, silver-haired, stood with his hand on a younger man's shoulder. Her grandfather, her uncle, the family Eleanor had walked away from. Beneath the photographs, a society page clipping from 1978. Eleanor Hargrove, debutante at the Richmond Cotillion. Her mother, in a white gown, gloves to her elbows, smile to her ears. She looked like a princess. She looked like someone Vivian had never met. Her mother was a debutante. The woman who taught her to make soup from vegetable scraps had once worn white gloves to cotillion. The woman who drove a 15-year-old sedan had once stood on the steps of a mansion. The woman who clipped coupons had been worth billions. Vivian sat on the closet floor and held the photographs against her chest. She didn't cry. She was past crying. She was in the place beyond tears, where the body is too exhausted for expression and the mind is too full for thought. Night fell. The apartment had no heat. Eleanor had been frugal even in death. The thermostat was set to 55. Vivian turned it up, but the old furnace groaned and coughed and produced only a lukewarm sigh. She wrapped herself in every blanket she could find. Her mother's quilt, a wool throw from the couch, the Afghan that Eleanor's book club had knitted one winter. The baby was restless, turning, pressing, kicking in patterns that felt urgent. At 2 in the morning, the contractions started. They came fast, sharp, like a fist clenching inside her. She lay on her mother's bed, knees pulled up, hands on her belly, and tried to remember everything she'd read about Braxton Hicks' contractions. Practice contractions. The body rehearsing for the real thing. Not dangerous, not at 7 months, not usually, but alone, in a cold apartment, with no one to call and no one to hold her hand. Not usually felt like possibly, and possibly felt like certainly, and certainly felt like the end of the world. She was completely alone, no husband, no best friend, no mother. In a cold apartment surrounded by a dead woman's things, with a baby trying to arrive 2 months early, and not a soul in the world who knew where she was. She called the only number she could think of. Dr. Nadia Harmon's emergency line, her OBGYN, the woman who had guided her through every ultrasound, every blood test, every anxious question about what was normal and what wasn't. "Dr. Harmon," said the voice on the other end. Clear, calm, professional. "It's Vivian Calloway. I'm having contractions. I'm only 7 months. I'm alone." "Okay, Vivian. Listen to me. I need you to breathe slowly. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Count to 4 on each breath. Can you do that for me?" She did. In, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. The contractions eased. Not gone, but softer, the fist unclenching. "Good," Dr. Harmon said. "You're doing great. These sound like Braxton Hicks. Your body is practicing. The baby is safe. You're safe. But I want you to come in tomorrow morning so we can check everything. Can you do that?" "Yes," Vivian whispered. "Thank you." She hung up, lay on her mother's bed, stared at the ceiling. The paint was cracked in one corner, a water stain shaped like a hand. She'd never noticed it before. All those nights, sleeping in this room as a child, and she'd never looked up. Everyone leaves. Everyone. My father left before I could walk. My mother left because her heart stopped. My husband left because his heart was never mine. My best friend left because she wanted what I had. What do I have? A baby who doesn't know yet that the world is full of people who leave. At 3:17 in the morning, she opened her phone, typed, "Can you survive a divorce while pregnant?" into the search bar. Deleted it, typed, "How to be a single mother." Deleted it, typed, "I feel so alone." Stared at it, deleted it. Put the phone face down on the pillow, pulled the blanket tighter, closed her eyes, waited for morning. Morning came. It always does. A knock at the door woke her. Soft but insistent. The way someone knocks when they've been knocking for a while and they're not going to stop. Vivian opened the door and found a woman standing on the mat, mid-50s, short silver hair, brown eyes, strong hands holding a paper grocery bag and a thermos of coffee. She wore a flannel shirt and jeans that had actually been used for work, mud on the boots, calluses on the palms. Ruby Bennett, Eleanor's sister-in-law, Vivian's aunt, the woman who married Eleanor's brother before he left, who stayed close to Eleanor afterward, who drove up from North Carolina every Thanksgiving to argue about cornbread and teach Vivian how to fish. Aunt Ruby, Vivian said, your mama would haunt me if I let you sit in this cold apartment alone, Ruby said. She pushed past Vivian into the apartment, set the groceries on the counter, opened the thermos, poured 2 cups of coffee, started cracking eggs. She didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations, didn't say, I heard about Grant, or Malcolm Price called me, or how are you holding up? She just cooked, turned on the heat, opened the curtains, let the light in. When the omelet was ready, she set it in front of Vivian and sat down across from her, took a sip of coffee, looked at Vivian with eyes that had seen enough of the world to know when words were useless. I know about the money, Ruby said. I know about Grant, and I know you're stronger than you think. But right now, you don't have to be strong. Right now, you just have to eat this omelet. Vivian ate the omelet. It was the first real food she'd had in 3 days. It tasted like butter and onions and safety. Ruby told the story the way she told everything. Straight. No flourishes. No softening. They sat at Eleanor's kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee, and Ruby laid out the history of the Hargrove family like a woman laying out cards. Face up. All of them. Your grandfather, Franklin Hargrove, built Hargrove Industrial from nothing, Ruby said. Started with a machine shop in Roanoke. By the time he was 50, he owned factories in 6 states. He was brilliant, he was ruthless, and he used money the way some men use fists. Vivian listened. The baby was quiet, as if listening too. Your grandmother, Alice, stayed because that's what women did then. She smiled at parties and took pills to sleep and never once spoke above a whisper in her own house. Eleanor was the oldest of 3 children. Your uncle Theodore was the middle. Your Aunt Patricia was the youngest. Patricia died young, car accident. Or at least, that's what the papers said. Ruby paused, took a drink of coffee. Eleanor was different from all of them. Smart, kind, but suffocated. Franklin wanted her to marry a banker's son from Richmond. A merger disguised as a wedding. Eleanor said no. Franklin cut her off, publicly, at a dinner party, in front of 40 people, told her she'd be nothing without the Hargrove name. And she left, Vivian said. She left that night, 22 years old, took nothing but a suitcase and her piano books, changed her last name, got a job teaching music at a public school in Arlington, met your father at a jazz club, married him 6 months later, had you. Your father left when you were a baby. Eleanor raised you alone. And the money? Here's the thing about your mother, Ruby said, leaning forward. She was gentle, but she was no fool. She never renounced her inheritance. Legally, she couldn't be cut off. Franklin had structured the trust to be irrevocable. So the money sat there, growing, and Eleanor let it grow. She made investments, quiet ones, smart ones. Theodore managed them grudgingly because the trust required family oversight, and Eleanor was still family, whether Franklin liked it or not. She built a foundation, Vivian said. She'd read this in Malcolm's documents. The Eleanor Callaway Foundation, music education in rural communities, $200 million endowment. She funded it anonymously. Nobody knew. The kids who learned piano from those programs, the teachers who got instruments for their classrooms, none of them knew that the woman behind it all lived in a 2-bedroom apartment and drove a 15-year-old sedan. Ruby smiled. It was the kind of smile that held both pride and sadness in equal measure. She was the richest piano teacher in America, Ruby said, and the happiest woman I ever knew. The doorbell rang. Malcolm Price stood on the mat, tall, thin, gray at the temples. He wore a dark suit and carried a leather briefcase that looked like It had seen decades of important conversations. He shook Vivian's hand with both of his, held it a moment longer than necessary. "You look like her," he said simply. They sat at the table, Vivian, Ruby, and Malcolm opened his briefcase. The documents were dense. Legal language. Numbers with too many zeros. But Malcolm walked her through it with patience and precision. The inheritance, the full scope. Written out in black ink on white paper. Controlling interest in Hargrove Industrial. Worth approximately $2.8 billion. Factories, distribution centers, supply chains stretching across the Southeast. Real estate holdings across 6 states, worth approximately $900 million. Office buildings, shopping centers, apartment complexes, land, an art collection valued at $300 million. Paintings by artists whose names Vivian recognized from museum visits with her mother. Eleanor had never said she owned them. The Eleanor Callaway Foundation. $200 million endowment. Funding music programs in 300 schools across 12 states. And a trust, specifically structured for Vivian's children. Activated upon birth. $4.2 billion total. Left by a woman who mended her own clothes and grew tomatoes on a fire escape. "There's one more thing," Malcolm said. "Your uncle, Theodore Hargrove, would like to meet you. He's been estranged from Eleanor for decades, but he honored every financial arrangement she made. He's 78 now. No children of his own. You're the last Hargrove heir. My mother gave me something more valuable than $4 billion, Vivian said quietly. She gave me a life where I learned who I was without it." Malcolm nodded. Ruby squeezed her hand. Then Vivian did something that would have confused Grant, something he wouldn't have understood in 1,000 years. She didn't call a real estate agent. She didn't call a private jet company. She didn't call anyone. She called Grant's lawyer, not Grant, his lawyer, Douglas Keller, at the Park Avenue firm. "Mr. Keller," she said, "I have one question. Is the prenuptial agreement between Grant Whitmore and Vivian Callaway currently on file with the court?" A long pause. The sound of typing, a drawer opening, paper shuffling, another long pause. "I'll need to get back to you on that," Douglas Keller said. His voice had changed. The confidence was gone. What was left sounded a lot like fear. Vivian hung up, smiled for the first time in weeks. She didn't need the prenup issue. She had $4.2 billion. But she wanted Grant to feel the fear, just for a moment. She wanted him to know what it felt like when the ground shifts beneath you and the walls you built turn out to be made of paper. She stood at her mother's piano, pressed one key, middle C. The note rang, clear and pure through the apartment. She let it fade completely, then pressed it again, louder this time. The sound filled the room like a voice returning after a long silence. 2 weeks changed everything. Vivian moved quietly. That was the key, quiet. No announcements, no confrontations, no dramatic phone calls at midnight. She let the machinery work. Let the lawyers do what lawyers do. Let the truth reveal itself the way truth always does. Slowly at first, then all at once, she retained Malcolm Price and his team, filed a countersuit in the divorce, citing adultery, emotional cruelty during pregnancy, and the invalid prenuptial agreement. She asked for half of Grant's estate, not because she needed it, not because she wanted it, but because she wanted him to understand that "she's a nobody" was the most expensive sentence he'd ever typed. Grant received the filing on a Monday morning. He called her at 11:15. His voice was different, not rehearsed anymore, not calm. The veneer had cracked, and what was underneath was panic. "What game are you playing?" he demanded. "You were nothing before me. Vivian held the phone against her ear. She was sitting in Eleanor's kitchen. Ruby was at the stove, making cornbread. The smell filled the apartment, butter and cornmeal and something that felt like home. I was everything before you, Vivian said. I just forgot. She hung up. Ruby didn't look up from the cornbread, but she smiled. Owen Merritt called the next day, Grant's business partner, the man who had co-founded the real estate development firm with Grant 8 years ago. Owen was the operational backbone, the one who managed the projects, the budgets, the relationships with contractors and city officials. Grant was the face, the deal-maker, the name on the door. Vivian, Owen said. His voice was careful, measured. I thought you should know. I've seen some things that concern me. Grant has been hiding assets, moving money into offshore accounts, using company funds for personal expenses. He bought a car last month. For someone. Not you. He's making reckless deals to cover the gaps. I'm not comfortable with the direction this is going. Thank you, Owen, she said. I appreciate you telling me. He's not the man I went into business with, Owen said. I'm not sure he ever was. She filed the information with her attorneys. Another piece, another brick in the wall of truth that was slowly surrounding Grant Whitmore. The confrontation came on a Wednesday evening. The restaurant was called Margot's. French, expensive, white tablecloths, and candlelight, and a wine list longer than most novels. It had been their place, hers and Grant's, their anniversary dinner, their celebration spot, the table by the window, where he once held her hand and told her she was the best thing that ever happened to him. Grant chose it deliberately. Home turf, power move. He brought Delaney with him. Another power move. Delaney wore a new engagement ring, a large diamond, cushion cut, on her left hand. She displayed it the way a soldier displays a medal. Proof of victory. But Vivian arrived differently. She was rested. For the first time in weeks, she'd slept through the night. Ruby's cooking, Dr. Harmon's reassurance, her mother's apartment. The combination had done what no amount of money could. It had reminded her who she was. She wore a simple black dress, her mother's pearl earrings. No jewelry from Grant, no designer labels, no armor, just herself. She ordered sparkling water, sat down across from them, waited. Grant spoke first. He always did. Let's end this quickly, he said. Sign the papers, take the apartment, take the $12,000 a month, be reasonable. I have a counter-proposal, Vivian said. Her voice was clear, steady, a voice she didn't recognize as her own, a voice her mother would have recognized. You give me what I'm owed under the law, since there is no valid prenup, and I won't pursue the adultery clause. Grant's face went white, not pink, not flushed, white. The color of a man who has just discovered that the card he was counting on was never in the deck. What are you talking about? He said. The prenup was never filed. Your attorney confirmed it last week. She's bluffing, Delaney said quickly, too quickly. Vivian looked at Delaney directly. For the first time since the penthouse, she looked at the woman who had been her best friend and saw her clearly, not with anger, not with hatred, with something worse, with nothing at all. I'm not, Vivian said. And I never was. Grant lost his composure. His hand hit the table. The wine glasses trembled. The restaurant went quiet. Heads turned. A waiter approached nervously. Grant snarled at him, actually snarled, like a dog whose bone has been taken. Delaney grabbed his arm, tried to pull him back. Her face was tight, scared, not of Vivian, of Grant, of the version of Grant she was about to inherit, the controlling one, the angry one, the one who hit tables and snarled at waiters and called his pregnant wife a nobody. Delaney was getting a preview of her future, and it wasn't the one she'd ordered. The waiter brought the check. Vivian signed it. Her hand didn't shake. not even a little. She stood up, nodded to both of them, and walked out of Margot for the last time. The fallout was immediate. Grant hired a new attorney. Aggressive, expensive. The kind of lawyer who files motions the way a machine gun fires rounds. Fast, loud, and aimed at maximum damage. Celeste Whitmore called Vivian that evening. The call lasted 45 seconds. "You will not destroy my son's reputation," Celeste said. Her voice was cut glass, every word polished and pointed. "We will bury you." "Mrs. Whitmore," Vivian replied, "your son buried himself. I'm just planting flowers on the grave." She hung up. Celeste called back. Vivian didn't answer. The following week, she met Theodore Hargrove, her uncle, the man who had stayed when Eleanor left, the man who had become what money made him, according to Ruby. The patriarch of the family, her mother, had fled. He lived in a house outside Richmond that could have been a small museum. Columns, a circular driveway, the same house from the photograph in Eleanor's cedar box. But the man who met her at the door was not the stern figure from the picture. He was 78 years old, frail, thin in the way that old men become thin when they've been eating alone for too many years. His eyes were sharp, though, blue and clear and full of something Vivian recognized: regret. He looked at her face and started to cry. "You look exactly like her," he said. "My God, you look exactly like Eleanor." He invited her inside, showed her the house where Eleanor had grown up, the piano room where she'd practiced for hours as a girl, the garden where their mother, Alice, had grown roses until the day she died. He told stories about Eleanor as a child. Stubborn, fearless, the girl who argued with their father at the dinner table when no one else dared to speak. "I should have gone with her," Theodore said. "When she left, I should have followed her out that door, but I was afraid. I was weak, and by the time I found my courage, too many years had passed." He offered Vivian full access to the Hargrove resources, legal team, financial advisors, the network that had been building for 50 years. Vivian accepted, but on her terms. "No publicity," she said. "No power plays. I want to protect my child and build something meaningful. That's all." Theodore nodded, slowly, with something that looked like peace settling over his old face. "You're more like your mother than you know," he said. That evening, Vivian and Ruby cooked Eleanor's shrimp and grits in Eleanor's kitchen. They didn't talk about money. They didn't talk about Grant or Delaney or lawyers or prenuptial agreements. They talked about Eleanor. Ruby told stories Vivian had never heard. Eleanor, sneaking out of the Hargrove mansion at 16 to play piano at a blues club in downtown Richmond. Eleanor standing up to Franklin at the Thanksgiving table when she was 17, telling him that money without kindness was just paper with dead men's faces on it. Eleanor choosing love over legacy, choosing struggle over cruelty, choosing a 2-bedroom apartment and a 15-year-old sedan and a daughter she could raise without poison. The kitchen filled with steam and laughter and the smell of butter and Old Bay seasoning. And for a little while, Eleanor was there. In the recipe, in the stories, in the warmth. Grant's world didn't collapse because of Vivian. That was the beautiful part. It collapsed because of Grant. Owen Merritt withdrew from their partnership quietly, filed paperwork on a Thursday, cited irreconcilable differences in business ethics. The press didn't cover it. The investors did. Without Owen's operational expertise, Grant's deals started unraveling. A luxury condo development in Brooklyn ran over budget by $40 million. A hotel project in Miami stalled when the contractor discovered that payments had been delayed. Two major investors, the kind of old money families who valued reputation above returns, pulled their capital after hearing about the divorce and the adultery. Celeste Whitmore's social circle began to whisper. In their world, divorce was common. Infidelity was expected. But doing it to a pregnant wife 3 weeks after her mother's funeral, that was a line even Manhattan's elite wouldn't cross. Not publicly, anyway. The invitations to benefits and galas started arriving with only Celeste's name. Grant's was quietly dropped. Delaney, meanwhile, was making her own discoveries. She had moved into the penthouse that Vivian had cleaned and decorated and filled with flowers. Delaney slept in the bed that Vivian had made every morning, used the kitchen that Vivian had stocked, wore the robe that Vivian had left behind. But the penthouse didn't feel the way she'd imagined. The view of Central Park was beautiful, but the apartment was cold, not temperature cold, something else. The silence was wrong. The spaces between words were too wide. Grant came home late and checked his phone at dinner and spoke to Delaney the way he'd spoken to Vivian, with the practiced warmth of a man who knew the words but not the music. He monitored her phone. She found out when he casually asked who she'd been texting at lunch. Not because he cared, because he needed to know, needed to control, needed to own every conversation the way he owned every building. He criticized her clothes, subtle at first. That dress is a bit much, don't you think? Then, less subtle. You need to look the part, Delaney. We have a reputation to maintain. He was cold after arguments, silent for days, withdrawing affection like a banker freezing an account, punishing her with absence, the same technique Vivian had endured for 23 months. The technique that works because it makes you doubt yourself, makes you wonder what you did wrong, makes you smaller, inch by inch, until you fit inside the box he built for you. Delaney called Vivian on a Tuesday night, 11:30, crying. He's not who I thought he was, Delaney said. Vivian was sitting in her mother's kitchen. The baby was quiet. The apartment was warm. Ruby had fixed the furnace. A cup of tea sat on the counter, still steaming. Outside, the Virginia night was black and full of crickets. She listened. Didn't gloat, didn't comfort, just listened. The way you listen to a weather report about a storm you already survived. I know, Vivian said finally. I married him. She hung up, finished her tea, went to bed, slept through the night. The divorce settlement came 3 weeks later. Vivian's legal team presented the case methodically. The invalid prenup, the adultery, the emotional cruelty during pregnancy, the financial irregularities that Owen had documented, hidden accounts, unreported income, company funds diverted for personal use. The judge listened. The judge was sympathetic. The financial discovery revealed patterns that the court took very seriously. Grant's attorneys argued, objected, filed motions, but the evidence was clear and the law was unambiguous. Without a valid prenuptial agreement, Vivian was entitled to equitable distribution. Half of $800 million. But Vivian did something that no one expected. Not Grant, not his lawyers, not even Malcolm. At first, she didn't take half. She took what was fair for the baby. A generous child support arrangement, a college trust fund, healthcare coverage, and a clause that Grant would have no custodial rights unless he completed 6 months of therapy and demonstrated consistent involvement. That was all. She didn't take the penthouse, she didn't take the car, she didn't take the offshore accounts, or the art, or the vacation homes. Her attorney was baffled. You're leaving hundreds of millions on the table, he said. Malcolm understood. She's not punishing him with poverty, Malcolm said. She's punishing him with irrelevance. I don't need his money to prove I mattered, Vivian said. I matter because of who I am. My mother made sure of that. The news broke 2 weeks later, not because Vivian called a press conference, not because she leaked it to the media. It broke because action speaks louder than secrecy, and the actions Vivian took were too large to stay hidden. The Eleanor Callaway Foundation announced a major expansion, 50 new music programs in underserved schools across the South, a state-of-the-art music school in Eleanor's neighborhood in Virginia, a prenatal care clinic funded by a private donor. Vivian Callaway, a local reporter, connected the dots. A feature story appeared in the Richmond Times-Dispatch, piano teacher's daughter revealed as Hargrove industrial heiress. Then, the national outlets picked it up. The story had everything: a secret billionaire, a humble piano teacher, a pregnant wife betrayed, a fortune hidden for decades. It was the kind of story that America loves. The underdog who was never really under at all. Grant saw the news. He was in his office, alone. Owen was gone. The investors were gone. Celeste had stopped returning his calls. He sat at his desk and watched Vivian's face on the screen, and his own face turned gray. The color of a man who has just realized that the woman he called a nobody was worth 5 times more than everything he'd ever built. He called Vivian. She didn't answer. He called Malcolm Price. Malcolm's assistant answered. Ms. Callaway is unavailable, the assistant said. Permanently. Delaney saw the news too. She was sitting in the penthouse, in Vivian's robe, drinking from Vivian's mug. She watched the screen and felt something settle in her stomach like a stone. She had left a billionaire's wife behind to become a controlling man's trophy. The engagement ring on her finger, the cushion-cut diamond Grant had given her with such ceremony, suddenly felt very heavy. The news anchor mispronounced Hargrove, said it with a hard G instead of a soft one. Vivian didn't correct anyone. She was too busy assembling a crib, a new one, in a new room, in a new life. The baby came on a Sunday morning in October. Vivian woke at 4:15 to a pressure she'd never felt before. Not the Braxton Hicks contractions she'd experienced in her mother's cold apartment. This was different, deeper, more certain, the kind of pressure that announces itself with authority and makes no apology for its timing. She called Dr. Harmon. Then she called Ruby. Then she got dressed in the dark, packed the hospital bag she'd had ready for 3 weeks, and drove herself to the hospital because she was Vivian Callaway. And Vivian Callaway did not wait for anyone to carry her. Ruby arrived 20 minutes later, out of breath, her silver hair wild, still wearing her pajama top under her jacket. I broke 3 speed limits, she said. Your mama would have broken 4. The labor lasted 11 hours. Vivian didn't scream. She breathed, counted, gripped Ruby's hand so hard that Ruby's knuckles turned white. Dr. Harmon was steady and calm and certain, the way she always was, talking Vivian through every contraction like a pilot guiding a plane through turbulence. At 3:22 in the afternoon, the baby arrived, 8 pounds, 2 ounces, a girl. She came out screaming, not crying, screaming, the kind of full-throated, furious scream that announces to the world, I am here, I exist. Make room. They laid her on Vivian's chest, warm and wet, and impossibly small and impossibly loud. Vivian looked down at the face, red, wrinkled, eyes squeezed shut, mouth wide open, and felt something shift inside her. Not a physical shift, something deeper, something foundational, as if every bone in her body had just rearranged itself around this one small person. Hello, she whispered. Hello, Eleanor Ruby Callaway. Not Whitmore, Callaway. Her mother's name, Ruby's name, a name that meant something. Ruby stood beside the bed, tears streaming down her face, laughing and crying and saying, "Oh, Eleanor, oh, you beautiful thing. Your grandmother would have been a mess right now. An absolute mess." Theodore Hargrove waited in the hallway. He had driven 3 hours from Richmond with a bouquet of pink peonies, Eleanor's favorite flower. He held them in his thin, trembling hands and waited patiently the way old men wait when they understand that some moments are not about them. When Vivian invited him in, he looked at the baby for a long time. His blue eyes, so sharp and clear an hour ago, went soft and wet. "She has Eleanor's hands," he said, and she did. Long fingers, strong, the hands of a piano player. Grant was notified. A text message from Vivian's attorney. Standard, professional, the information a father is entitled to. His response came 30 minutes later. One word. "Congratulations." Vivian read it, set the phone down, picked up her daughter, and did not respond. Owen Merritt sent a handwritten card. It arrived at the hospital the next day. "She's lucky to have you as her mother. Welcome to the world, Eleanor Ruby." Vivian pinned it to the nursery wall. It stayed there for years. 6 months passed, the way months do when you have a newborn, too fast and too slow at the same time. Each day a blur of feedings and diaper changes and midnight wakings. Each day a miracle of tiny sounds and tiny fingers and the weight of a small head against your shoulder. Vivian moved into a brownstone in Virginia. Not a mansion, not a penthouse. A brownstone, 3 bedrooms, a garden in the back, and a porch where she could sit in the evenings and watch the fireflies. Eleanor's piano sat by the front window, the Baldwin upright with the beautiful tone. Vivian had it tuned and placed where the afternoon light could reach it. Baby Eleanor's playmat was spread on the floor beside it. A blanket, some toys, a wooden spoon that the baby preferred to all of them. She worked on the foundation's expansion from the kitchen table. Emails and phone calls and grant proposals spread across the surface, surrounded by baby bottles and burp cloths and a half-eaten sandwich. She funded the music school, opened the prenatal clinic, established a scholarship program for single mothers pursuing higher education, named it after Eleanor. Of course, everything was named after Eleanor. She ran into Delaney at a coffee shop on a Tuesday afternoon in April. She almost didn't recognize her. Delaney had lost weight, the wrong kind of weight, the kind you lose when stress eats you from the inside. Dark circles under her eyes, a brittle quality to her smile that hadn't been there before. She wasn't wearing the engagement ring. "Vivian," Delaney said. Her voice cracked on the second syllable. "Delaney." A silence. Long, long, full of everything that had happened and everything that hadn't been said. The coffee shop hummed around them, the hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of conversations, the scrape of chairs on tile. Delaney opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Her eyes were wet. She started. Vivian held up her hand, gently, not with anger, not with coldness, with something that was beyond both. "I don't need an apology," she said. "I need you to learn from it." She picked up her coffee, walked out, left Delaney standing there, holding a latte she would never drink, in a coffee shop where nobody knew that 2 women had just closed a chapter that had been open for 14 months and 40 years of friendship. Grant's company was under investigation by the end of that month. The Securities and Exchange Commission had received a complaint, not from Vivian, not from Owen, but from one of the investors who had pulled their money and wanted to know where it had gone. The investigation revealed the offshore accounts, the diverted funds, the unreported income, the reckless deals made with other people's money. Celeste stopped speaking to Grant publicly, stopped attending his events, stopped defending him at dinner parties. She retreated to her townhouse on the Upper East Side and spent her days at the Met and her evenings at the opera and her mornings pretending she didn't have a son. Grant was alone in the penthouse that Vivian had decorated, the penthouse where Delaney had worn her robe and drunk from her mug. Delaney was gone now. She'd left after Grant shouted at her over a credit card statement, left the way women leave controlling men. In the middle of the night, with one suitcase and a feeling that she'd been here before, he sat at the kitchen counter, the same counter where he'd placed the divorce papers, the same counter where the casserole dish had shattered. The marble had been replaced. You couldn't see the cracks anymore, but Grant could feel them. The prison door had been unlocked all along. She had been her own warden. Vivian understood that now. Sitting at her piano in her brownstone in Virginia, with her daughter, gurgling on the floor beside her, she understood. The cage hadn't been Grant. The cage had been the belief that she needed him, that she was small without him, that his world was the only world. Her mother had known, had always known, had raised her with nothing, so she would know what she was worth without everything, had left her billions, so she would know what she could do with everything. Two gifts, both priceless. It was a Tuesday evening, October, almost exactly 2 years since Grant proposed in his office between meetings. The light through the window was amber and warm. Baby Eleanor was in her high chair, banging a wooden spoon against the tray with the delighted focus of someone who has just discovered rhythm. Vivian was making shrimp and grits, Eleanor's recipe, the last recipe her mother ever taught her. The cast iron skillet, the only thing she took from the penthouse, sat on the stove, heavy and black and perfect. The shrimp sizzled, the grits bubbled. The kitchen smelled like butter and Old Bay and lavender from the candle on the windowsill. The doorbell rang. Malcolm Price stood on the porch, briefcase in hand, smile on his face. He held a folder of documents. The final transfer of the Hargrove Trust, the last signature needed to complete the transition. Quite a view, he said, looking at the fireflies blinking in the garden. My mother would have loved it here, Vivian said. They signed the papers at the kitchen counter, between the salt shaker and a sippy cup. $4.2 billion, transferred with a pen that cost $2, and a signature that took 3 seconds. The most ordinary act in the most extraordinary moment of her life. Malcolm left. Vivian washed the pen, put it back in the drawer, turned off the stove, plated the shrimp and grit, set one plate on the table and one small bowl of mashed sweet potato in front of baby Eleanor, who immediately smashed her hands into it and laughed. Vivian ate slowly, tasting every bite. The shrimp was perfectly seasoned. The grits were smooth. The cast iron skillet had done what cast iron skillets do. It had remembered every meal that had ever been cooked in it and added those memories to this one. After dinner, she washed the dishes, dried her hands on a towel that had no initials, picked up her daughter, held her against her shoulder, felt the weight and warmth of her, smelled the baby shampoo and the sweet potato and the clean cotton of her onesie. She walked to the piano, sat down on the bench, settled Eleanor on her lap. The baby reached for the keys with her long fingers, her grandmother's fingers. Vivian pressed middle C. The note rang through the brownstone, clear, pure, the same note it had always been, the same note it would always be. Middle C doesn't change. It doesn't lie. It doesn't leave. It rings true every time, no matter who plays it. Baby Eleanor stopped fidgeting, listened. Her eyes went wide. Vivian began to play. Chopin. Nocturne in E-flat major, Opus 9, number 2. Her mother's piece, the piece that was open on the music stand the day Eleanor died. The piece that had drifted through a two-bedroom apartment in Virginia every evening after dinner, filling the rooms with something that money could buy, but never create. She played with her eyes closed, the way her mother taught her. Feel the keys, Vivian. Don't watch them. Trust your hands. She trusted her hands. She trusted herself. Finally. The music filled the brownstone, floated through the open windows into the garden where the fireflies blinked, drifted down the street where neighbors sat on porches in the warm October air, traveled outward into a world that was large and complicated and often cruel, but that also contained, within its vastness, the sound of a piano played with love. The casserole dish was long gone, shattered, swept up, thrown away.